The third-generation Suzuki Jimny subcompact SUV is a rare market long-liver. It has been in production for 2 decades, from 1998 to 2018. And don't let the toy appearance fool you. With the reliability of the crumbs, everything is like an adult. Jimny's engine range is original. None of the units reaches 100 horsepower. And the most unexpected is a 1.5-liter turbo diesel. Firstly, because the K9K unit developed in 2001 has French roots, its versions, among others, are also installed on our Renault Duster. And secondly, it also makes Suzuki related to Mercedes cars. We have a cat crying for diesel emigrants from Europe, about 1% of cars. And it makes little sense to purposefully hunt for just such ones, especially when it comes to early versions before the first restyling in 2005. Their diesel engines have the least chance of cloudlessly working out their good resource of 500 to 350,000 kilometers, without experiencing the destruction and cranking of the connecting rod bearings after only 100 to 150,000 kilometers. In addition, due to their wear products in the oil, the health of the turbocharger is rapidly fading. The original one will cost $1,200, and cartridges from alternative manufacturers can be found for $200 to $300. After several upgrades by 2012, in honor of the second restyling of Jimny, the survivability of the liners was normalized, although they are the first to suffer anyway if the level or quality of the lubricant is low. But, as if in contrast, the fuel equipment, headed by injectors, has become more sensitive to the diet. Second in line is the high-pressure fuel pump, and the EGR exhaust gas recirculation system after 100 to 120,000 kilometers can also fail in earlier versions, those younger than 2008. Other motor exotics, 14% of cars, are found on right-hand drive Far Eastern versions. In a 3-cylinder 660 cubic centimeters engine, the IHI turbocharger, $500, sometimes does not want to work longer than 80 to 100,000 kilometers. And then the chain in the timing drive also produces its resource. Regular leaks of oil seals and gaskets are a common thing, and an oil burner after 120 to 150,000 kilometers is a sign of piston rings that have lost their mobility. All in all, not the best choice either. Whether it's 4-cylinder petrol aspirated volume of 1.3 liters, particularly simple and reliable old-school G13BB single-shaft unit, 17% of vehicles. His main enemy is age, because even the youngest specimens will soon exchange their third decade with him. But the motor simply does not have serious congenital sores. To manually adjust the clearances in the valve drive once every 100 to 120,000 kilometers, a pair of elementary wrenches is enough, and even a broken timing belt does not threaten the valves with death. And most Suzuki Jimny have the 1.3 M13A series engine that appeared in 2001. Like its predecessor G13BB, it is able to work out at least 300,000 kilometers and requires only a little more attention. Increased oil appetite after 140 to 160,000 kilometers is similarly stopped by updating the valve stem seals. The valve clearances under the cams of the now 2 camshafts are also manually adjusted, but twice as often and by selecting washers. The motor can be capricious due to the EGR recirculation valve, and after 160 to 220,000 kilometers you need to be prepared for a simple and therefore relatively inexpensive replacement of the stretch chain in the timing drive. The M13AA version, which appeared after the restyling of 2005, with updated nozzles and a mechanism for changing the valve timing VVTI, was initially marked by a poor start in cold weather. Check whether the ECU firmware has been updated, excluding fuel overflow by injectors. The Japanese successfully finalized the software in 2007. The Aisin automatic transmission, 56% of cars, in 2004 changed the index from A174 to TW40E, but retained the 4-speed, slow character and unpretentiousness inherited already in 1998 from the old 3-stage forerunner Aisin A172. To kill the A174/TW40E box before 200,000 kilometers, you need to try hard. For example, go off-road more often and not change the oil at least once every 50 to 60,000 kilometers. However, the design is elementary. The repair is not ruinous and comes down first of all to replacing aged gaskets and seals, cleaning the valve body and updating locks and clutches. Surprisingly, off-road hardships can affect the health of a mechanical 5-step, 44% of cars, even faster. It is not easy to reach 100,000 kilometers. Repair will not break, $200 for a branded kit or $100 for wheels, or $100 and $60 for alternative parts, respectively. But if the mechanics are spared and the oil is renewed every 45,000 kilometers, it rarely attracts attention before 200 to 220,000 kilometers. The lower gear synchronizers can then retire. And for older specimens, it will not be superfluous to keep a spare cable, $20, for the clutch drive and the spare parts kit. It can not only turn sour in the shell, but also burst. Before buying, pay attention to the number of drive axles. Single-wheel drive versions are extremely rare, but they are found 1 in only % of cars. However, all-wheel drive vehicles can actually end up without front axle support. Suzuki Jimny is not a crossover with a trivial viscous coupling, and in its classic part-time off-road transmission there are much more places to put your hands on. Fortunately, even the barbaric attitude of the transmission is able to endure longer than 100,000 kilometers. 6 crosses of the cardan shaft track generally serve indefinitely, $50 branded and 10 analogs. Although someday the rearmost cross will fail first. Both axle gearboxes with intact seals and an oil change every 60,000 kilometers also do not speak for years, although the bearings will not fail to note the insufficient level of lubrication. And the most popular source of various entertainment in 10 years is the pneumatic, vacuum, drive of the hubs. Almost everything that is available in this economy is capable of capriciousness. Control valves, depressurized lines, especially hoses like to crack and frost, no longer holding seals or clogged hubs themselves. If you do not connect all-wheel drive at least occasionally, the mechanism may turn sour. But forgetting to turn off the front end on asphalt is fraught. Quickly send the pivot bearings to consumption, and then the chain and the transfer case. By the way, pivot bearings need regular lubrication. Wheel bearings need to be replaced occasionally. The main danger is washing out of the lubricant. And for the steering knuckles, do not forget to monitor the well-being of the old-fashioned felt seals, $30 per side for regular ones and twice as expensive as reinforced non-original. The leakage of excess oil on the fists is a sentence on the front axle oil seals, and on the rear brake drums. To a greater extent, both are typical for specimens older than 2005. Replacing the hardcore transfer case lever with buttons and servos in 2006 added potential surprises. The funniest one is the current cardan shaft between the gearbox and the rozdaka. The plug is to blame, because of which dealers change the shaft under warranty. Although most often in transmission electrification, the connection of the front end is resisted by both the sensors of the servo drives for activating the all-wheel drive and downshift, and their wiring, it suffers from contacts not only with off-road, but also with winter urban chemistry. The fate in general and the lifespan in particular of the suspension are determined by the time spent off-road. Dependent spring structures with strong levers are an example of reliability, if not noble behavior. Springs do not sag. Levers are one of the most unclaimed items in parts stores. And even the bushings of the front stabilizer, which are usually known as consumables, on decent roads are quite capable of enduring up to 100,000 kilometers. The rear stabilizer mounts do not wear out at all, due to the lack thereof. Earlier than 150,000 kilometers, shock absorbers and steering tips are rarely given up. Silent blocks, both in front and behind, often agree to serve much longer than 200,000 kilometers. It is easy to get rid of knocks in the steering mechanism, in an elementary way, as in the VAZ Classic, by adjusting the gap between the worm and the roller. It makes sense to change it only if there is an unremovable backlash with the leak. And if you suddenly don't feel the help of an amplifier in the pre-styling Jimny, first make sure that it is present at all. The basic Spartan versions do without the power steering. Off-road significantly affects the health of usually trouble-free brakes, and if the rear drums are easy enough to clean after swimming in the mud, then the front drums without lubrication can turn sour. The parking brake, in its purest form, does not like being ignored. In a Jimny with an automatic transmission, after a few years, the cables and the shells begin to wedge. And keep an eye on metal brake lines. Dirt accumulating near their plastic retainers after the first 5 years of service can lead to through corrosion. The body itself is even more afraid of rust. If the frame holds up noticeably better than other adult SUVs, and problems with simple electrics are mostly accidental, then body plumage devoid of a zinc layer after 8 to 10 years can lose ground. And the bottom of the doors, trunk hinges, wheel arches under the lining, cups behind the headlights or a jack niche are not the biggest troubles. Worse, if the metal begins to disappear in poorly ventilated cavities in the places where the body is attached to the frame. Well, chip paint, most readily appearing on the edge of the roof and door frames, is better to tint immediately. They bloom before our eyes. However, the body is practically the only weak point of the Suzuki Jimny. Do not neglect the anti-corrosive. Otherwise, serious sores are most often the consequences of old age, tuning and off-road exploits. Reliability is now in the price of 3 or 4-year-old babies can be estimated at $1 million. But, given the extreme simplicity of design and the durability of the suspension, engines, and transmission, you can safely look for your own version among older specimens.